Hi everybody, this is going to be a really short and sweet video about the best way to mask off translucent effects on your minis. Until the day when WizKids starts making these translucent parts where you can just snap them onto the mini, I'm going to keep doing it this way. So, I'm a DM, and I personally really like the kind of translucent like spell effects, like when they do that when WizKids Paizo does that on their minis. But it's not how I like to paint minis. I like to use the airbrush. So at least to get a good zenithol prime down. So if you're like me and you like to do that, then this video is for you. So what I'm using is a product called Eileen's Tacky Glue, and it's basically just a really strong craft glue. It's like an Elmer's, but this is a fast drying type. And then what I'm doing is I'm painting on a mask. If you're if you're like me and you went to art school, then you probably, or if you're ancient like me and you went to art school, you might have done a little bit of airbrushing where you masked off parts using liquid frisket. And frisket is just like, it's the film that you sort of cut out, that you make the shapes. Like if you're gonna paint like a sphere with an airbrush, you would cut out a circle and then you would airbrush around the edges, to get that sphere shape. And it's a real pain in the ass. Trust me, it's a huge pain in the ass. But they also made liquid frisket, which is more for like watercolorists and things like that, where you have a spot on your painting and then you put it down and it sort of like has a rubber cement kind of consistency, but it smells way worse. It smells completely awful. But the benefit that we have being miniature painters that they do not have is that we aren't painting on canvas, we aren't painting on paper, we're painting on plastic. So we can use other things that will do a better job, especially for paints that are a little bit tougher, that are going to stick onto the plastic more like a primer. So this is just I'm just making a liquid mask out of this strong PVA glue. So yeah, you could use any kind of polyvinyl acetate glue, Elmer's, like I guess you could use wood glue, but this is just going to create a mask over the part that we want to mask off. And so I can go ahead and do the zenithol prime how I would normally do it over it, and then just paint like normal, and then just peel it off. So polyvinyl acetate glue takes a long time to dry. Like if you're using wood, if you're doing like woodworking projects or something, you want to wait at least like 24 hours to let it dry, or like wood binding, if you're doing something like that. But we're not doing that, we're just making a little mask. So you do want to let it thoroughly dry. You want it to be like completely dry to the touch. But it's going to have this kind of like frosted glass look to it when it dries, when you've made a mask out of it. And you want it thick enough so that you can peel it off, so that it'll come off in large enough chunks. But you don't want it thick enough that it's gonna take a long time to dry, and thick enough that it's gonna turn into like a chunk of cement on your mini. I personally, when I do this, I like to use a piece of MDF board. I just have some random MDF cutoffs, and I use them for other things after they're pumped full of primer, because they like to soak up paint. So yeah, after they've soaked up enough primer, they're totally rigid and they won't warp anymore or anything like that. So yeah, but I just like to sort of turn the board around, with all the minis on it, and then get them, give them a good coat, and then sort of pick them up and then check them out and see if they have any spots where they need some extra, paint. So after I've given everything a good black prime, I'm going to go ahead and hit all the minis from sort of a top-down angle, almost straight on, but more of like a 45-degree angle, sort of top-down. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's called a zenithol prime, and basically it's just you're priming the miniatures so that they have some natural shadows, and zenithol meaning that you're sort of painting a light source as if the sun were coming down from its highest point, like noonday sun, like the sun is directly overhead basically, and you're kind of giving the minis a natural sunlight underpainting. And then personally, I like to give the faces of the minis a little bit more of a light prime, because it's a focal point. So I line my minis up so that they're all sort of facing forward, and then I tend to give them a little bit heavier coat on their faces, and I'll just turn the board and give them a little bit lighter coat, so that the lightest part of the prime is going to be on the model's faces, and then I'll go in later and actually dry brush like facial features and things like that, or like weapons, things like that. They're supposed to be focal points. So I used to, as a last step of my zenithol prime, I would sort of shoot a layer like almost top down on top of the minis using a lightest white kind of primer, but I stopped doing that. Now I do this like last little dry brush on areas that I want to pick up, like faces and just, or if something is directly facing the light overhead, then I'll do it as well. So I'm just using I'm using some P3, I think it's Sickly Skin, and it's kind of like an off white, like sort of a greenish white, and I just like it. But I watched a video by Vince Venturella called "Preparing for Your Best Paint Job," and he basically talked about how he does the zenithol prime, and then this is how he does it, and it totally makes sense. It's got to be the best way to do a zenithol prime. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that and make sure that I get everybody's faces and like any details that I want to make sure that they pop out before I actually peel the little mask off. And just a quick little piece of advice about dry brushing for, if you're like a 12-year-old kid and you're trying to learn how to paint minis for your army or whatever, I hear a lot of people say in these videos, take almost all the paint off of your brush, and then make sure that it's almost like dry, and then do it again and again. You don't need to do that. Just do it lightly. Just use a light touch. I usually I'll wipe a lot of the paint off, and then I'll kind of rub it on my hand to see if it picks up the ridges on the palm of my hand, and then I'll just sort of lightly brush it on. Like, you just don't use a lot of pressure. Just use a light touch. That's all you need to do. And time for the big reveal. And as you can see, I'm just sort of like peeling it off with my thumb. It just comes off. So yeah, you want it to be thick enough so that it will actually peel off, but like thin enough so that it's not gonna make something that's impossible to peel off, if that makes sense. But the best tool that I found to peel off stubborn pieces is I'll use like a little like dental tool, and it came with something, I don't know where I got it, but it's basically like, picture that you're a dentist and you're sort of getting like that like tartar in between the teeth, and like the type of tool that you would want to get that out, or that's what you're using, it's like a dentist tool. I think it's a sculpting tool, but it looks like a dentist tool. and then just get into those little nooks and crannies and like peel it out with the little hook. I gotta say though, when you do get it off and you have this like perfectly masked off translucent part, and then you've got a really nice zenithol paint job next to it, it's pretty satisfying. Pretty satisfying to peel it off. So anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. I think I got everything that I wanted to say in there into that 10-minute YouTube attention span. Trying to keep my videos a little shorter. But yeah, I hope that helps you out.